to China and India, and it's clearly stated in this document. So once again, nobody hesitates that Asia should be the destination for Ukrainian products. So let me start with some tendencies that Ukrainian exports is nowadays can be characterized. First of all, Ukraine found itself in a deadlock, and it's not an exaggeration because we can see the main tendency, Ukraine exports fell drastically and comprises less than $40 billion nowadays. And Ukrainian government took all possible efforts to somehow reverse this tendency. This is not a good thing for economy because we have a huge deficit for balance of payments. And now we have 2.5 billion of payments shortfall, and this is a very dangerous thing, because that's why we have huge hryvnia devaluation, and imports becomes much more expensive for Ukrainians, and it's also not a good thing. Consequences of this tendencies is national currency devaluation. As I've said, it's deliberate actions taken by Russia as aggressors that started war against Ukraine, and this is one of the measures of hybrid war against Ukraine, and it probably, according to the standpoint of Russian governors, should lead to public unrest, but thanks God we are not experiencing this at the moment, but it's one of the tools that probably can provoke this public unrest. And why substitute Russia is a key problem for Ukraine, because in different periods of time the amount of Ukrainian exports to Russia comprised something like 25%. Sometimes this figure went up to 30%. And currently we can see that in 2014 we clearly observe that this tendency shifted, and European Union countries are now overwhelmingly exceed CIS countries, and this is also one of the fruits that can be felt by Ukrainian exporters, and thanks to work that Ukrainian government takes. This is the principal idea, to start exporting more to European Union, and the second idea to start exporting to Asian countries. Here we have slide why substitute Russia. It goes without saying, but some figures I would like to pay your special attention to. First of all, it's approximately 10% of enterprises destroyed thanks to Russia. Up to 8,000 people killed, but we have new figures, 10,000 people killed, and approximately 1.5 million internally displaced persons. So of course it's not contributing to express promotion of Ukraine, and Russia is a hostile country, and we need to find another markets to be more independent in the sphere of external trade. This table tells us what are another partners. Nobody is going to neglect the fact that Russia is still the key market. Trade representative says that Russia is not a partner, it's just a country we are trading with. But here we can say the inclusion of numerous Asian countries to the list of countries that we are exporting more than on 1% in the geographical structure of Ukrainian exports, and we can probably go from down upwards. So here we have Indonesia, we have Kazakhstan, we have Thailand, we have South Korea, we have Saudi Arabia is Middle East, is Iran, but the most obvious changes is China and India. And I would also support the point that was already told by His Excellency the Ambassador of India, that India really contributes to Ukrainian external trade, because we have a positive balance of trade with India, and India started buying not only commodities that is not very good for Ukraine, but India started importing products with high added value, and it also contributes to Ukrainian exports. Special attention thoroughly should be paid to the gradual increase in the share of Asian countries in the structure of Ukrainian exports. In 2017, because in previous slides we have statistics on 2016, and it should be revealed by our respective agencies, but we already have data that needed to be revised and officially published. But here we can say that the share in exports of countries of the region, namely Asian and Southeastern Asian countries, is almost 1.5 times exceeds the volume of goods delivered to the CIS. It should be also noted that the highest relative growth of Ukrainian exports in 2017 compared to 2016 observed within the supplies to India and Iran. We have also our products represented in Thailand and Indonesia, and all these trends should be keenly observed, and we need to take it into consideration. Those are the positions excluding commodities with added value that already are sold to countries located in Asia, and this is a matter of specific interest of Ukrainian government and exporters. What can be bought from these countries in Ukraine, and why Ukraine is intended to export to these countries. So first of all, we can say that India importing engineering products, railway equipment, wagons, fertilizers, it started in 2015. This tendency is growing in 2016 and 17, and our current task is do our best not to seize this tendency and to develop it in future. We have Turkey that with exception with iron ore, started importing semi-diesel and diesel engines for land vehicles, gearboxes for vehicles, parts for land vehicles. It's really significant changes in Ukrainian export strategy and exports, and probably we should fully support this. I deliberately put this slide without translation into English because this is a print screen from export strategy of Ukraine, and we have a list of key markets. We call it markets in focus that have the predominant importance for Ukrainian exporters. And it probably we shouldn't translate all the names of the countries, but you can see that they are colored in differently in Asia, in Southern East Asia region. And we can definitely say that Asia is opening for Ukrainian exporters and becomes more and more important trend in Ukrainian external trade. So Ukraine officially acknowledges the fact that Asia is at the level of Minister of Economic Development and Trade, that Asia is a key market and everything should be done to start exporting to Asia, and thanks these countries for this support, that they clearly import more and more from year to year. So thank you for attention. That's it.
Thank you so much. And dear colleagues, actually I need your advice. If you don't mind, we have another presentation which is very near, almost the same topic. So for that I would like to invite our colleague Alexander Pechosa, assistant professor from the Department of International Finance, yes, of the Institute of International Relations, with almost the same topic, prospects for export developments of Ukrainian agricultural goods to China and India. It should be logical then, yeah?
Cultural, because the trade policy of our country is to support agricultural producers and agricultural exporters to Asian markets, and these markets are scope markets to Ukrainian producers. And as my colleague Professor Navo mentioned, India, and also Ambassador of India mentioned, that India contributes a huge part of our export, and it is approximately 11% in cash in 2017. So in 2017, India became the biggest importer of Ukrainian agricultural goods. And the trend to, in this context is that the number of deals, especially in plants and other agricultural products, is growing. The main products that we export to India are peas, especially peas that used as seeds. So we have quite good selection and price for peas for seeding. Soybean oil, unrefined sunflower oil, and tomato paste. So here we could see that tomato paste is one of the products that has some added value. And of course soybean oil and the sunflower oil. So we could say that we export products with some added value to India. And India now is the leading importer of vegetable oil from Ukraine at the moment. Reasons for export development, and we hope and we expect to develop this cooperation, is two main reasons. Price of the products. Our prices are competitive, and of course delivery time. For example, freight to Ukraine, from Ukraine to India take an average 18-21 days. And for example, freight to China will take a month. 18-21 days with appropriate logistics, and in China even with appropriate logistics a month. So we have 9-10 days economizing in transportation period. And of course it should be noted that purchase prices in India are higher than in PRC in China. So at the moment India is the main scope market for our agricultural producers in terms of the development. The next our scope market in Asia is Chinese market, and Ukraine-China trade relations also are developing, and the main exports from Ukraine consists of unrefined and refined vegetable oils. The same situation then with the India vegetable oils: sunflower oil, soybean oil, rapeseed oil, and highly oleic oils. Shipments are made by tankers, flexi tanks, and bottles. And it is a very interesting fact that Chinese companies often buy bottled oil without labeling and further using of their own labels. So for our producers, of course it is interesting to sell to China, but also it is very interesting to develop their own brands in terms of marketing strategy. But Chinese companies want to sell our sunflower oil with their own brands in their own network. So this is the power of huge retailers. But this is also the prospects for development of our marketing strategies of our producers. Next, specifics of trade. Quite often China established unspoken instructions on the policy of cooperation with other countries. And unfortunately, very often Ukrainian companies and trade policy in terms of Ukraine-China cooperation sometimes connected with highly risk environment, and sometimes Chinese government receive subsidies for cooperation with Ukrainian enterprises, and sometimes with other CIS countries. So this is the question of policy and the question of subsidies in trade. Specifics of trade financing. Financing of import transactions through Sinosure is practiced in China. This is a very powerful institute that support export and import activities, and this financing allows making advance payment to suppliers and receive insurance from non-delivery. And unfortunately, Ukraine very often excluded from practices that Sinosure provided. In terms of other specifics in trade financing, Chinese enterprises often work on letters of credit. And we should say that nowadays the procedure of opening letter of credit in Chinese banks is quite tough, and we could say that it's becoming even tougher under modern conditions. So for our companies, financial transactions and cooperation without banks and without financial institutions in China are nowadays quite difficult. Ukraine is now on the list of the countries with a higher risk. So this is a question of intergovernmental relations and the questions of communication between our governments to be excluded from this list. How to work in that kind of environment? Use of offshore firms, especially in Hong Kong, especially from Singapore and Malaysia. What we could say as a trend, increase in prices and volumes of corn sales. So we start to export more corn to China, but not for feed of animals as a bioethanol production. Ukrainian extraction cakes has received permission to import into China, which only increases the capacity of Ukrainian exports. And the basic problem of supplying of meal for export was and is sanitary control. At the moment, only seven Ukrainian companies has a permission and right to export to China. So we have a lot of things to do in terms of our bilateral trade relations, but also we have huge perspectives, as with India, as with China also. And we expect and ready to work to develop this cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. And now, to make our event more multivectoral, let's say, let's come to another aspect of the cooperation. And it's my pleasure to invite our colleague from the Department of International Information, Dr. Oksana Frolova, with the presentation about Asian achievements in the sphere of information society development. Yes, please.
So, dear participants of the conference, dear guests, I have the honor to represent a short report on the topic Asian achievement in the sphere of information society development. Nowadays, in the modern world, there is a process of informational, technological, ideological development of the modern information society. And all developed countries seek to secure a leading position in development of international society. There is a clear and comprehensive dependence between the national position, the position of the country in the international arena, and the development of its national society inside the country. Nowadays, quite everybody understands what does it mean information society. But 50, 60 years ago, there were only several persons who understood what does it mean and what are the consequences of information society, what are the benefits of it. And they were Daniel Bell, Manuel Castells, Fukuyama. And speaking about today, speaking about the Asian region, of course, we have to admit that there were several persons, several scientists from Asian region. They were Yujiro Hayashi, Tadao Umesawa, and Yonedzi Masuda. They were representatives from Japan. So, what does it mean information society in general? So, the state of development of modern civilization, characterized by the increasing role of information and knowledge in the life of society. Also, increasing share of information and communication technologies, information products and services in gross domestic product, the creation of global information infrastructure. All those points I am speaking about, they are here present on the slide. Also, this is a society where everyone can create, access, use, and share their information. And also, people have the opportunity to realize their potential, maybe contribute to their development, and maybe to improve the quality of their life. The main drivers of information society can be digital information, communication technologies, and they really can change the situation in the society, including warfare, social sphere, economy, policy, education, healthcare, and so on. Also, we can see some close theories, close related concepts to the information society, such as network society, digital society, information society, knowledge society, and so on. Then, of course, there are 2 points I usually like to speak about. There are 2 points of this problem. The advantages, of course, and we can understand all of them. There is a short list of them. For example, solving the problem of the information crisis, solving the problem, for example, of global problems of the world, providing the information priority in comparison with other resources, transition to the service economy, gaining global IT, formation of informational unity of all human civilization, ensuring access to information and intellectual resources of all civilization, etc. Of course, there are some threats and problems for the sake of truth. And I also would like to mention some of them, just some of them. First of all, it's inequality of access to new information technologies, technical means, disproportions to development. Also, problems of quality and reliability of information. Lack of censorship in information networks. This point can be disputable because some people, some societies don't want to be censorships. They want to be free in choosing their choice. Then problems on information security. Of course, we know a lot about cyber terrorism, about hacking attacks, and so on. Use of existing advantages and means for informational and psychological influence on individual and public consciousness, of course. And problem of adaptation to the realities of information development. Today we're speaking about Asian society and interests of Ukraine in Asia, and of course I want to make a stress on Asian society. So there are some peculiarities of Asian society, of Asian model of building information society. There are some common features which can be present in some countries of the Asian region. For example, it's alternative social and economic development of the region, competition with the West. The principles of Confucianism, unity of society, harmony with the outside world, universal justice, humanity, and so on. Affirmation of their own value orientations, The connection between cultural traditions and social transformation. Speaking about cultural traditions, they are really very deeply included in the model of Asian information society. We can speak here about education, industrial discipline, corporate loyalty, family harmony, devotion, and so on. And cooperation between the state and the market. Then I will not take your time, and I missed some slides about the specifics of Japanese model of information society. There are some peculiarities. Also, there is peculiarities in the Indian model of information society. I missed them because of the lack of time. But I would like to stop on interesting international reports, researches about the measuring of information society. So we know that there are some important international forums and organizations which are busy, partly, of course, with the measuring of information society in this or that sphere. Today, I would like to present you several reports, annual reports of such organizations as UN, International Telecommunication Union, World Economic Forum. Also, we know about the World Summit of Information Society and World Forum of Information Societies. So it's really working forums and working organizations. So speaking about the first report, it is the report of International Telecommunication Union. Why I'm speaking about those reports? There will be several of them further. Just because of those numbers, we can have some results. Which country is the best? Which top 10 countries are the best in the sphere of information society? So you can see here the measuring the information society report. The previous year, it's not nowadays yet. And here, the top 10 in the rank. You can see here, Korea, among others, Ireland, Korea, Switzerland, Denmark, United Kingdom, Hong Kong, China, Netherlands, Norway, Luxembourg, and Japan. And out of 10 top countries, there are 3 countries from Asian region. You can see. Also, we have another global competitiveness report this year and the previous year. It's World Economic Forum. By the way, what are the pillars, the principles of building such reports? I can mention them. About the global competitiveness report, they are institution, infrastructure, macroeconomic environment, healthcare, higher education and training, financial market development, technological readiness, business development, and innovation. So I will show you also top 10 countries, and you can see Switzerland, United States, Singapore, Netherlands, Germany, Hong Kong, Sweden, United Kingdom, Japan, and Finland. Also, you can see here Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan. 10 countries, 10 regions out of 3 out of 10 also are representatives from Asian region. And one more report, Network Readiness Index, the 2016, and also you can see which country is the most ready to the network. Singapore is number 1 here. Then we can see here Japan also. And the last one from the reports, it's a UN report, United Nations e-government report. And here we have e-government development index. So also we can find here Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Japan is 11 or 12, not in the top. And also e-participation index, top 11. Japan, Republic of Korea, Singapore also are in this list. Of course, the situation in the Asian region is not the same, is not equal. There is some difference between the countries, but in general, Asian region, some countries from Asian region are really very successful in building their information society. And Ukraine, of course, can take some experience for building our information society here in Ukraine. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. It was really very interesting, not very usual actually. Thank you so much. And again, to provide different discussions on different issues, I would like to invite to the speech Dr. Anton Lovin, Associate Professor of the Department of International Law with the Asian legal experience. Getting the perspective, please.
Thank you very much for the floor. Seems like I'm the only lawyer left here, but therefore I'll try to be very concise. And besides, unlike the previous speakers who've provided really in-depth analysis of their respective spheres, I'd rather like to share an observation, which may not be very precise, but that's something that I'm seeing pursuing my very particular professional interests. And I like to approach this observation with several seemingly unrelated glimpses. The first one, the thing I've been personally involved with, that was the preparation of a team of our institute for the prestigious moot court competition in international aviation law. The final round took place quite recently on Sunday, to be precise. And the competition happened in Seoul, South Korea, where the team of, I quote, Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Patiala, India, defeated a team from Singapore. I repeat that the competition took place in South Korea, and the organizers are partially the Leiden University and partially Sarin Foundation, an Indian foundation, in fact. And it's worth mentioning that last year it was the team of the National University of Singapore that defeated the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences. And the 10th law moot court has already been announced to take place in 2019 in Chandigarh, India. And by the way, this year's another very prestigious competition in Washington, D.C., that is the moot court competition named after Philip Jessup, the winner was a team from Australia, but the second contender was another team from India. So we see that the Indian legal teams are storming all fronts of the most prestigious competitions legal around the world. Another similarly unrelated glimpse is that at the beginning of last year, the Singapore Singapore International Arbitration Center published its first edition of rules for investment arbitration. They had no such rules previously because they had been mainly engaged with international commercial competition. So by doing this step, they declared the ambition to enter the somewhat more elite sphere of international investment arbitration. But before this, Singapore has established itself as the center for international commercial arbitration. And if we, it's maybe curious for a lawyer at least to compare the caseload of that center. It's somewhat comparable to the caseload of Ukrainian International Commercial Arbitration Court by our Chamber of International Trade and Commerce. And in 2017, the caseload of the Singapore Center was 343. Pardon, that was in 2016, the last date the statistic is available. At the same year, our Court of Arbitration had twice as many, some 500 plus, but it fluctuates with years, and this year's caseload, the number of new registered cases is pretty much the same, around 300, or to be precise, 331. Continuing with the arbitration and ADR, it may be noticed from the literature in the field, especially international commercial arbitration, that if we take our and Western textbooks from 90s or early 2000s, they mainly pay attention to the practice of Western countries, which is reviewed as mandatory. Sweden, the London Court of International Arbitration, Switzerland. But the newer editions pay more attention to the new and Asian centers for arbitration, to their arbitration rules, for example, the China International Economic and Trade Arbitration Commission, and it's more and more included as a must for a review to be comprehensive. Another glimpse before the observation. There is a fresh book. It was published by Anthea Roberts 2017 with somewhat, thought-provocative title, Is International Law International? The main thesis is that, various schools understand law very specifically, and there is some type of parochialism among international legal scholars around the world, which is a universal tendency, in fact. And some words are said about the Chinese school of international law as taught and practiced in China. And there is an observation, I quote, China's international law academics maintain few connections with practice. Then the author hurries to add that the situation is actually improving, and more various ways for improvement, rotations, involvement of Chinese legal professionals with the state governance, and so on. But the point is that an insider from the Ukrainian academia in international law may actually state quite the same thing about how things are in Ukraine. That is, international people who teach public international law in Ukraine connect relations with practice, but not exactly practice in public international law, to put things this way. So the observation I would like to share, and the observation for which I try to approach with all these glimpses, is like this. The discipline of comparative legal studies and the really fresh discipline of international comparative legal studies tends to emphasize the difference, tends to emphasize the specific issues, and probably that's something done by my colleague in the previous address, Professor Olga Butkevich. But we can see that, the Asian legal experience, at least in its mainstream part, is not exactly that specific. And many things which happen there can be understood by some, good sound common sense and rationality, rather than reduced to some particular cultural imperatives. There are really good, strong legal schools which are strong in the Western meaning of the world. And then that's why I think it may be high time to pay attention, not exactly for seeking some, particular, maybe parts of what we may call somewhat orientalistically Eastern wisdom, but because for the same reasons for which Ukrainian scholars have been looking to the Western legal tradition all these years. So because they are at the forefront of many things which are happening and finding legal solutions and finding actually rational, very legal solutions which are not exactly determined by the cultural and particular context of those countries. Another observation in the same vein is that the same book provides for a number of topics in international legal studies funded by, the exact name, National Social Sciences Fund of China. And I've scrolled through these topics. Of course, many of them are China-specific, but none of the topics looks really Chinese culture-specific. So they're very global in their contents. That's probably the observation I wanted to share. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much to Dr. Anton Lovin. And just to mention that it must be very interesting to learn Asian legal experience. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, our colleague, Professor Gnatovsky, visited Bangalore Law School in India, and it was a very interesting visit he shared with us. Now to continue to study Asian experience in different spheres. It's my special pleasure to invite to the speech, our colleague from Latvia, Sigita Struberga, researcher from the University of Latvia, Riga, with the topic on public diplomacy of China, new prospects for the cooperation and with Eastern European countries.
Good afternoon, honorable guests, professors, colleagues. Since we have started to talk about more soft issues like information space, I would like to continue this trend and would like to offer you to discuss such issue as public diplomacy. And I will concentrate on Eastern European space, but will make some more special points on Ukraine and Latvia, since I'm here and I'm from Latvia. So, both of our countries last year were celebrating 25 years of diplomatic relations with China, and both of our countries are proud of diplomatic as well as economic win-win relationship with it, as well as a status of strategic partners we share with it. Establishment of new relationship frameworks such as One Belt, One Road initiative, 16+1, which is more topical for us, I would say, but still, all of them are offered by China, and they are kind of main trends in contemporary diplomatic discourse. Accordingly, the points discussed with this topic are mainly regarded to economics and infrastructure development. At the same time, we all know that actually it is a much wider issue and relates to other spheres of politics and social life. And one can underline that according to Chinese traditional thinking, this change of relations on mutually beneficial conditions is preceded by establishment of their cultural and ethical basis, first human relations and then only business. And for this and other reasons, public diplomacy, or some may say people-to-people diplomacy, I wouldn't say that it's the same. I would say that public diplomacy is something wider, but in this case, I would like to concentrate on this people-to-people diplomacy more. And it comes to agenda as a strategically important tool for widening and deepening of relations. And at the same time, picture in Eastern Europe demonstrates that there is a space for further development of relationship between our countries and China. And political analysis insists that actually China has the largest soft power potential here in Eastern Europe, right after Western Bloc countries. And its rapid development, ancient and rich culture, economic, political, and military power shape the foundation for China's effective use of soft power. Accordingly, there is an extended amount of research done concentrating on Chinese soft power projections in Europe, including Eastern Europe. But at the same time, it should be noted that public diplomacy, it's not one-way street, it's two-way street. What means that it's reasonable to have a closer look on the benefits this win-win cooperation brings to us as well. and not only look in a traditional way with emphasizing the benefits which subject of power projection receives. And for this reason, this concept comes in, of course. And for this reason, the purpose of my small presentation is not to go into depth of theoretical threats or weaknesses of understanding soft power concept or public diplomacy concept. Of course, we can discuss this later during Q&A, but still, I believe that we can point on this. And rather, I would like to underline that despite the fact that those concepts are still contested by many academics, in a practice, we observe the both of them as important part of practical diplomatic discourses included in foreign policies. So this public diplomacy, when we have a closer look, is composed from many spheres. I did put here only 4 of them, and actually, more or less, we can connect those 2 together, or some connect those 3 together, and also we can complement this with, for example, military or whatever. But still, for this presentation, I think this is more or less enough to demonstrate issues I would like to. And the point is that the modus operandi is the same for all of them, but the implementing time differs, and that's the point. And this is those which are connected with cultural, societal, or educational science issues are most long-term ones. And it results in a new management on a daily basis, strategic communication and relationship building, and it can have different forms and can have positive or negative effects depending on the aim and depending on the direction they take. But further, I will concentrate mainly on culture and education. So when it comes to, culture, no, not this one, again. Yeah, when it comes to culture, our countries actually can count a number of important cultural events played out by China within cultural cooperation frameworks. And usually, first thing which comes in our minds is Confucius centers, etc., Confucius centers. But in practice, of course, it's much wider. And cultural diplomacy is the application of all cultural exchange models practiced either by individual, community, state, or institutional actors with the aim to facilitate and improve relations and collaboration between the states. Its value is reflected by the implementation of 5 main principles: respect and recognition of cultural diversity and heritage, global intercultural dialogue, justice, equality, and interdependence, projection of human rights, global peace and stability. Taking in account political and security situation we are facing here in Eastern Europe at the moment, these issues are fundamentally important for our region. No less important is a conclusion made by some Chinese public diplomats, including cultural ones, which have become a starting point for Eastern European countries for participation in One Belt and Road initiative. Some even underline this trend as a success story, which has great potential for further deepening and widening of relations between Eastern Europe and China. beside exactly cultural diplomacy is easy to show case, since no serious financial outcomes are expected from it. Concerts, exhibitions, and other forms of cultural exchange are goal, not means in particular sense, opposite, for example, to business forums. But again, for Eastern European countries, exactly those programs, mainly financed by China, are not only about receiving, but also about going out in the world in a way. When it comes to educational diplomacy, this is a quote from the directive of China's Ministry of Education from February 2016, and it puts emphasis on patriotic education. According to this directive, it is suggested to share knowledge about the development of China with international students from abroad. This goes together with increasing already large number of Chinese students going abroad for studies. According to UNESCO, more than 700,000 Chinese students were studying abroad in 2015. Those numbers actually differ. This is from state webpage, but still, I believe that it demonstrates this rapid growth of students going out for studies from China. And and here we also should put in a picture the question of Eastern Europe, and then it's not that success story anymore. Because when we have a look, when we have closer look on Eastern and Central Europe, only 15,000 students are studying there. At the same time, when we have a closer look to Latvia, the number is really small. And actually it's the same with Ukraine. I had a look on information provided by Ukrainian Center for International Education. And at the moment, China is not between top 10 countries of origin of international students in here. Hopefully, we will face change of this situation, since China remains the world's #1 place of origin of international students. And also, China is #3 on receiving international students. But also we can talk about some other trends which are topical. The one I would like to mention is taken from annual report of Center of China and Globalization. And last year they wrote that in terms of academic subjects, foreign language and literature studies, education and business management degree programs continue to win popularity among the Chinese studying abroad, while engineering science and technology, computer and information science, math and statistics, as well as social sciences subjects are running out of stream, which is, I think, quite important for us to know. And the third one tendency we can observe is the rapid development of joint venture and cooperation in education inside China to prepare Chinese students abroad, like language courses, language schools, etc. And the last one, but not the least one, is regarding to international education in China. Number of international students in China has increased in 2-digit rate, and the increase especially came from Belt and Road countries, so us as well. And it is partly due to the breakthrough in China policies to provide internship opportunities to international students after they graduate. And again, we just have to be there. From this, we can conclude that as the #1 place of origin of international students, China continues to play crucial role in global education. And according to the results of survey conducted by WCA, among all the pooled Chinese students abroad, 61% of them choose school reputation as the top consideration for the school selection, followed by application successful rate. Then the next one, third one, is school location. And here we can play kind of important role if we will play out successfully our location. And the final one, the fifth one, is expected income level after graduation. So to conclude, like in more general terms, what does it mean for us? The first, more international students from the Belt and Road countries, including us, enrolled in China's education institutions can provide more high-quality local talent, help implement the strategy, and perform as medium to spread Chinese language and culture here in our countries. Also, in here, they will bring back specific knowledge for cooperation with China. The second one is cooperation within education and science sphere is critically important in order to establish high-quality collaboration for innovations and development of industries within both parties. No less important issue is providence of support in development of new public administration and bringing innovations in this sphere as well. The third one, for the development of education and science, no less important are investments provided by China in the forms of scholarships, common research projects, and support for think tanks working in a close collaboration. And the final one is that education diplomacy allows us to tell our partners in China about our perspective, our values, and our orientations. So in order to conclude, I would like to say that people-to-people or public diplomacy is cornerstone for building relationship with China. And China, with its centrally planned approach, has reached reasonable results in order to develop soft power mechanisms within Eastern European countries, sorry for mistake. When it comes to our development pace here with our tools of public diplomacy is far more slower. And let's take, for instance, Latvia. We still even don't have a branch of public diplomacy within Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Another issue I would like to point out here in conclusions is that European values are still important part of our discourse within public diplomacy, and it is important to maintain it. And the final one is that there is a need for more cooperation platforms in a wider range of spheres of public diplomacy branch as such. Thank you.
Dear Sigita, thank you so much, first of all, for your coming and for sharing your ideas and the attitudes. Thank you so much for your presentation. And now again, I need your advice, as the next presentation is made by Alexei Koval, who is a very famous journalist, but now he's in China. Fortunately for him, but unfortunately for us, he sent us a recorded speech, but maybe we will leave it up to the end of the discussion. What do you think? Because we have more presentation. So, right now? Okay, yeah, we will do that. Thank you for understanding. So now again, next field of the discussion will be about security, because we did not mention before with all the diplomatic staff representatives, but 18th century actually produced not only the perspectives but also a lot of challenges. And that's why let's try to examine at least some of them, and I would like to propose to speak about it, and I invite my senior colleague, Professor Sergei Galaka, Professor of the Department of International Relations and Foreign Policy, on Donald Trump administration and nuclear problems of North Korea and Iran, how we can estimate it. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I will speak from my place because I do not have a presentation to be projected on the screen and to spare your time. As you know, we live in a very dynamic situation, both in Asia and globally now, and with Donald Trump's election and President Xi's new authority, geopolitical situation became even more affluent. And Donald Trump's administration from the very beginning put nuclear problems of North Korea and Iran as its priorities. And last year, immediately after inauguration, facing nuclear and missile tests, he took very rigid position with his famous tweets early in the morning. Sometimes people in the Department of State were a bit disoriented for a while, but then there was a very important development which is closely connected with a sporting event, Olympic Games. And during that period, Olympic Games, American diplomacy was watching closely rapprochement of Southern and North Korean governments, and especially the visit of Kim's sister, who was heading North Korean delegation, and the agreement to hold a summit between North and South Korea for discussing those acute security problems between those countries. And suddenly there was a U-turn in US position, and President Trump accepted the invitation for a summit with North Korean leader, whom he blamed continuously during his first year of presidency. And I would like to just share very briefly some ideas and some prospects and challenges involved into this situation. Maybe you'll have some questions for discussion. Okay, so prospects and challenges of the future developments involve fairly unpredictable style practiced by President Trump in foreign policy, plus another very closely connected issue of Iranian nuclear program. As we know, 3 years ago, back in 2015, there was a very important agreement signed on Iranian nuclear program, which was a compromise involving many key actors in international relations. And President Trump's skeptical, to say the least, approach to that agreement led to a very uncertain situation in as far as its future is concerned, because next May, President Trump has to confirm or reject that agreement. In case he rejects that agreement, it would be impossible to proceed with North Korean summit, to my mind. At least there were a very high and unpredictable situation developing through these weeks, just as we discuss it. Perhaps some discussions are going on between American, North Korean, South Korean side, and South Korea has to conduct summit with North Koreans in late April. So immediately after that, next issue on the agenda would be summit between North Korea and the United States. Again, if Iranian agreement is skipped, then there is very high risk that the whole situation becomes unpredictable again, and the chance of the discussions between North Koreans and Americans would be perhaps out of question. But if it was reaffirmed by President Trump, then the new avenue of discussion is open, though many specialists are pretty skeptical about the possibility to agree upon some major issues involved, because North Koreans insist on some kind of security guarantees on the side of the United States. China is pretty much interested and involved in the situation. Understandably, Chinese security interests in Korean Peninsula are involved, and last summit between Chinese leader Xi and Korean leader Kim might be the best evidence to that. And again, too many questions of interrogation hanging in there, and a lot of unpredictable situations which might develop in the future. Another unpredictable or unknown in this situation might be the outcome of the possible North-South Korean summit. If that summit is a success and there is a gossip about the possibility, just a possibility, of preliminary agreement, maybe even signing the peace treaty between two Koreas, which would be a breakthrough. Again, many people are skeptical about that outcome, but if that summit fails, then in turn, what happens in the Iranian situation might be the key issue, and even if Iranian situation is developing positively, then there's still, in my mind, the risk involved in the US-North Korean summit because of the failure of South North Korean talks. So there is a lot of challenges and risks for the nearest future, and we'll face it during next weeks, literally. Just yesterday and today, it's in the papers, I just read Washington Post and New York Times, the United States has officially admitted that the Secretary of State-elect Pompeo had secretly visited North Korea. So they had some preliminary talks, perhaps discussing the place, possible agenda, and outcome of that key meeting. No full information is available, so we'll have to wait to clarify what the results of those preliminary meetings were. But basically, there is very high level activity going on, and we only see perhaps some manifestations on the surface of some internal very important changes and shifts. Again, a lot of possibilities, unprecedented openings, but at the same time a lot of challenges, a lot of risks involved. What is Ukrainian interest in that situation? As you know, Ukraine had third largest nuclear arsenal deployed on its soil. The estimates vary between 4,200 to up to 6,000 nuclear warheads, mostly tactical nukes. Ukraine's decision, yeah, true, under pressure, but it was conscious decision to give up the nukes, led to signing of Budapest Memorandum, which unfortunately, as we now see, was almost complete failure. So Ukrainian interest in that development is direct, and we do not try to hide that we are interested in preserving the non-proliferation regime. With all its deficiencies, with all its problems, Ukraine has made that important step, and Ukraine would be interested in positive developments in that area, in stability. But again, as Trump would say, who knows? We'll see. And that's the end of my brief and controversial presentation. If any questions, I will try to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually sounds dangerous. So maybe now it's the right time to continue with the Middle East, yes, and I will invite for the speech our colleague, Dr. Roman Petyur, on Ukraine's policy towards the Middle East to search of a conceptual framework. Yes, please.
Thank you. It is a great honor to speak today. I would like to share some ideas on, brief ideas on a vision of Ukraine's Middle Eastern policy. First of all, the need to conceptualize Ukraine's policy toward the Middle East is dictated by several reasons. First of all, it is the fact that the regional system has undergone substantial transformations recently, so we need to adapt Ukraine's policy to the new realities of the political balance in the region. And we can see that such issues as the Arab-Israeli conflict, Iran-Arab confrontation, and even religious sectarianism in the region, all these issues need to be re-evaluated. Similarly, we are witnessing that new regional leaders arising after the Arab Spring, and this needs to be considered when talking about priorities in the region. Also, Ukraine's foreign policy has met significant challenges after the regime change in 2014. Our foreign policy now is significantly correlated with the positions of the European allies and the United States. In such circumstances, we need to finally select our priorities, understanding whether we are politically motivated or economically motivated or both. Depending on the selected strategy, we may expect different results. The political part of our policy calculations is a weak point. Ukraine today has too little space for a political maneuver. Being too dependent on the position of the US, Ukraine's policy and decision makers tend to see the world in black and white colors. Of course, according to their view, Russia is on the black side. But at the same time, we do not have much evidence that the other major powers are staying strictly on the white side either. Taking into account the Middle Eastern political culture, we can say that building one's policy on hypocrisy and double standards is not the best policy for a power like Ukraine. Instead, I think that diplomatic combinations based on understanding local interests could pave the way to political and economic gains for Ukraine. Economic cooperation has been the major priority of Ukraine's policy toward the Middle East for years. Currently, the regional countries make up about 12% of Ukrainian exports. Whether this is a significant figure or not, we can say, if we mentioned that 10 years ago, this share was 11%. As we can see, 1% increase is hardly a success. Ukraine's economic gains are closely related to political circumstances. One of Ukraine's major economic partners in the region previously, Syria, is now experiencing hard times. A decade ago, Ukraine's annual export to this country was close to $1 billion, but now it is less than 10 billion. We can blame the war for this, but we should also mention that a popular opinion in Ukraine is that the ongoing war in Syria is in interests of Ukraine, since it withdraws Russia's resources and therefore shifts attention from Ukraine. Unfortunately, such a schematic and simplistic approach precludes policymakers from crafting a policy based on national interests. If we follow the described logic, we would always be interested in wars and conflicts in the Middle East or elsewhere in order to deflect Russia from Ukraine. Such an approach creates a situation when deterioration of security situation in the region benefits security for Ukraine. Of course, such a logic, flawed in its fundamentals, is dangerous and in building relations with other countries, especially the countries of the Middle East. Ukraine's major trade partners in the region are Egypt, Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. The mentioned countries are, of course, heterogeneous in culture and policy orientations. Therefore, they require a differentiated approach towards Ukraine's partners. To summarize, I should say that, of course, it would be difficult to maintain the balanced relations with all the countries of the region, given the current political reality of Ukraine. Nevertheless, the regional policy shall be based primarily on Ukraine's national interests, but not on political affiliations with extra-regional countries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your interesting report. And let me say that our next speaker, Dr. Svetlana Andrushenko, is very busy and she promised to come back to us because today, you know, the Institute hosts a lot of ambassadors, not only from Asian countries, but also from Italy and Germany, and she's busy with one of them right now. And I can see our next speaker, no? Oh, okay. Then I would like to invite for the speech our senior colleague, Professor Anton Filipenko, Professor of the Department of World Economy and International Economic Relations of the Institute of International Relations, with very interesting presentation as he visited India, so he would like to share his experience on the interdisciplinary in Indian studies. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently in January, I had presentation about interdisciplinary as a global trend in research and education. It was in Delhi, in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And now I'm going to precise this presentation in terms of Indian studies. Indian studies, at least complex phenomenon, includes at least political, economic, historical, anthropological, and other issues as a component. And in light of interdisciplinarity, this means to use such notion like plurality, heterogeneity, synthesis, holism. Are common principles concerning area studies, everything, everywhere. American studies, African studies, European studies, including Indian studies. And at the same time, area studies feels different in the extent to which reaching focused contemporary politics, civilization history. But India is not only country, like Professor Elena said before, but Indian civilization, ancient civilization, economic development. There is own Indian model of economic development. And thus, the prominence of different disciplines, combine different disciplines in this area in Indian studies. Economic development, political reform, creation of new national institutions, social transformation, expansion of literacy and consequent culture production, like said the ambassador said about cinema in India. I remember before previous cinema in Soviet time, and changing psychological attitudes as well, were all seen as a parts of the common processes in Indian and other area studies. For instance, in Cambridge Indian studies there are 4 transdisciplinary courses, subjects. Sustained Indian democracy, biggest democracy in the world. Economic development, social and cultural development, India and the world, 4 big subjects. And the syllabus set of the 3 questions. Why is India changing? What about progress or another regress? Or how far in fact in India changing? It's maybe response or answer would mostly or better said Indian professors, Indian people. But experts try to find this answer as well. And how are these changes affected India? India as a country, as a society. And the area study field has to particularly focus on the specific local conduct, history, culture, economics, politics, environment, other important elements. In some extent, I repeat it. And area studies project needs to be human, to be social, to be political, to have markets. As economists, to be markets. How could we, in markets in terms of market in classical traditional point of view, and markets in social, in political point of view. And that require for pursuit of a more general knowledge in terms of specific historical and civilization context as a patterns. And such knowledge could be broad application without being abstractly universal. Typical example, interdisciplinarity. Development and underdevelopment. Very, very crucial point of view, questions. Class and power, or power and knowledge, according to Michel Foucault, famous French philosopher. Power and knowledge, relationship. And states and nations. States and nations. And it is possible to formulate in preliminary conclusions about interdisciplinary in area studies everywhere, including India. First place, formal, universalizing approaches have their limits here because we have a specific for each area studies, African, European, Indian, Chinese, American, even Russian studies, or former Soviet studies. Secondly, area studies are being creatively reimagined recently, reimagined. Important new engagements take connection between regions and in terms of culture, trade, diplomacy. Third, shift in global economic growth, like said Elena Bardilovska in your presentation, economic growth, it's some economic convergence now. As said Ambassador, India and in the 16th century has 12% of world GDP. And after colonial, only 0.201%. Now 2.4%. This is different speed in economic development, economic growth. And previously, this lumped together underdevelopment, or in other, a new geopolitical inputs. Now we are talking about India as a superpower. And globalization itself helped produce new patterns of regional, global power, like BRICS, maybe without R, BRICS after some in time. And fourth, globalization of higher education states new demands for regional knowledge and regional centers to mediate international regions and universities. And also a matter of research. It has been shaped transnational scholarly collaboration like today. Sometimes it's moving some with brain drain, like in Ukraine, in some extent to West Europe, to Poland, for instance. But simultaneous created global scientific networks in different areas, scientific networks. Yeah? We are member of different global scientific networks around the world. And distinctive trait of area studies, including India, are the close link to schools of international relations and diplomacy, Particularly, they are doing interdisciplinary problem-oriented research from think tanks. In Jawaharlal University, I have seen many think tanks exist in the university. It's in Indian tradition as well. And the institution involves the process of co-creation, some project network. Another kind of problem-oriented interdisciplinarity focuses on the education in area studies, because students, like in our institute, everywhere and everything, learning different disciplines, at least in our economics, international law, information, business, international policy, and so forth. And interdisciplinary synthesis, very nice key cornerstone in research and education, includes formulating questions or issues or problems, creating theoretical frameworks, discuss, or methodology, epistemology, combining methods, different methods, including mathematical, game theory, selected instrumentations, deploying analytical categories. And interdisciplinary synthesis embodies a vast array of purposes of disciplinary combinations, imply demands of characterizations that shed light on common cognitive process, disciplinary crossroads, cross-disciplinary approach. For instance, in research studies, purpose is iteratively constructed, progressively clarified through dynamic calibration or verification. Prior understanding subject matter, no doubt. Common theme, common research subject matter. Inquiry interest, practical consideration, viability. And heart of interdisciplinary learning synthesis is shaped by the intellectual pursuit learners embark on. This range, complex explanation, no doubt, graphic designs, like today, sometimes in my former students, Anton Nanavov, and metaphors, yeah, very, very interesting metaphors, different metaphors, like human capital or other metaphor, or narratives and the purpose of learning initially established. And attention to critical position. There is a critical method or critical methodology, or they say sometimes realism, or in German point of view, German realist, policy. And is able to challenge the emerging system of thought and understand our proclivity to error and to promise of deeper, broader, meaningful learning and research in Indian and other area studies. Conclusion. There are many Indian center of Indian studies in contemporary world, from Australia to East Asia, West Europe, and America. Many. In their activity, they are using some common principles I have seen in some of them, theoretical, methodological, epistemological approaches. Interdisciplinary has here integration and synthesis function, being as entry point of departure in learning and research processes in Indian and other studies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Filipenko, for your speech, and first of all, for your enthusiasm. And I would like to mention that Professor Filipenko is one of the promoters of the interdisciplinarity in international studies, and one of the next upcoming events, actually, we will have in our institute will be the conference about interdisciplinarity, and he is a promoter of this idea, the organizer of this conference. And now, as our previous speaker is here with us again, I would like to invite Dr. Svetlana Andrushenko, the Associate Professor of the Department of International Relations, to speak about green development trends, because she is also very famous for her initiatives and her enthusiasm with new directions in the international relations studies. So please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizers, because we have a long discussing the huge importance of Asian direction in foreign policy of Ukraine. So thank you very much, Professor Elena, for your efforts and for everything that you do here in all this direction. And probably my kind of report here is about the green growth, green development trends in Asian countries and in Ukraine, and what are the main prospects and possibilities for developing our cooperation here, because there are huge possibility for development here, and a number of ambassadors, they also stress the importance of many so-called green projects here. So currently we know that the probably biggest social and academic issues of the world, they are just connected with the search for new development models here, and the green growth is one of the most talkative and most popular thing which is discussed among economics, politics, social studies, research, and of course we want to speak about some technical developments as well. So of course when we speak about the green trends in development, we meant we used to mean the green development as a green growth, that the environment and climate changes that can just push and stimulate the development of new technologies in probably the overwhelming, the most spheres of economy and policy and social life. It's one of the comprehensive and overwhelming concept here. And when we speak about the green economy, which is the basis for new model of development, it means just a number of imperatives, which means the improvement of well-being and social standards, social equality with simultaneous respect and simultaneous minimizing, decreasing of environmental risks. This term, green economy, is very popular nowadays and lays the basis, which was also stressed by the the Paris Agreement on climate change in 2015. We know that nowadays most economic and regional organizations, they adopted so-called green strategies for development, and Asian countries are among the leaders in this process. We know that the last 5-year Chinese development plan is also incorporated and mainly based on green development, on the idea of green gases emissions, energy efficiency, renewable energy as a source of economic development, as the basis for economic development. The next is the example of the South Korean strategy on green development and Korea, and we have also seen this in the speech of Korean ambassador to Ukraine. We also see that the South Korea stressed on the leading role in environment, energy efficiency technologies, green development all over the world as well. The same is about Chinese strategy of 2011 of economic development, and Asian partnership, climate change Asia partnership also stressed the importance of green concepts of green development and strategies. With this view, also important to see that there are a number of principles which are very important. Of course, sustainability, its inclusiveness, which means the social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and of course the importance of 6 very important spheres. The first is agriculture, energy, tourism, food, health, and building, transport and energy and transport infrastructure. Why just I stressed on these spheres of green economy? Because we see that these are the main spheres of economic development, and they are also important for Ukrainian development as well. I want to speak about Ukrainian perspectives, and I just want to share some ideas of what are the possible cooperation in this sphere, which became more popular from year to year. Nowadays we have an intensified formats and dialects in this area. Of course, when we speak about Ukrainian perspective here, we have an issue of, first of all, the conflict and war, with simultaneous reforming and modernizing our economy. Of course, it's a very complicated issue, but at the same time, we know that our foreign policy perspective as the European Union is very important with the point of view of European Union standards as well. And it's just rather positive aspects that just environmental or climate change or green standards of the European Union, they are very important for the trade relationships as well as for Asian countries. When we speak about agriculture, it's a very important aspect of interest for India, China, Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Japan as well, the issue of standards in crops, in wheat, and Ukraine can become one of the leading exporter of wheat to these countries. And we know that Malaysia, now we have the leading role in Malaysian trade of wheat. When we speak about Indonesia, the Philippines, it's also the perspectives, the same as about meat. Any agriculture and food programs, they also have a certain standards and requirements with a view on organic, bio, and so on developments. So this is very important, just to base Ukrainian modernization on the basis of these standards of European markets as well as Asian markets, which are very close, and the EU, Asian countries, formats and dialects in this sphere, they are very close to the Ukraine to be more close to the standardization in all these areas. Moreover, when we speak about Ukrainian draft on low carbon economy project till 2035, which stressed the importance of growth of energy efficiency in economic of Ukraine, which just stressed the 35% of, more than 35% of renewable energy in the Ukrainian economy till 2035. And it also means that Ukraine is open for a wide range of cooperation in this area. Of course, the very important aspect with this perspective is so-called experience, green growth and green standards experience. I've just mentioned above the concepts of strategic green development of most of Asian countries, and here the bright examples of just modernization of economy, very quick modernization of economy on these green standards in different spheres, which are important for Ukrainian economy as well. When we speak about the other aspect is technological leadership of China in solar and wind power. When we speak about technological leadership of Japan, of South Korea, of course this means a kind of technological transfer between Ukraine and these states, and this is an important issue and the very just bright example of perspectives in this area, of the mutual interest of Asian states and Ukraine as well, with a view on this green development. When we speak about green development tourism, and the ambassador of Korea also stressed on this, the green tourism, the eco-tourism is also an important idea for Ukraine, because Indonesia is the brightest example of development, its strategy of economic development on the basis of green tourism. That is why I think this idea is also, with a view on experience, could be laid as the basis for Ukrainian development, because Ukraine is full of different examples of development of green, eco, and so on tourism here. When we speak about experience, it's very important to stress on the importance of research and education. Environment education, sharing of experience, development of common approaches, this is also an important part of these green growth and green development concepts, which is the key for the development of as Ukraine as well as Asian countries as well. And the most perspective is, of course, the technological cooperation, research, and technical cooperation in means of renewable energies. And now we witness the intensification of cooperation between Ukraine and Japan. Last month, intensive negotiations between Ukrainian government and Chinese representatives, subcommittee on economic and trade, on the idea about the intensive investments into the renewable energies, because solar, wind power is also perspectives as for Ukraine, and nowadays we have more beneficial conditions for foreign and Asian investors in this area because of the changing approaches to green tariff in the sphere of renewable energy efficiency. And Ukrainian government now is more aware about the standards and establishing more favorable conditions for investment in this area because of certain interests here. And of course, when we speak about agriculture, we saw that land, water, our resources is also of the high interest for foreign investors, but the other very important aspect here is to take into account these standards and just standards that could be used in a common agricultural business concerning the possible consequences for Ukrainian resources water and land mainly. And the probably last but not the least, as we just used to say this, it's the political cooperation in this sphere, the political dialogue in this area, and very important factor that when we speak about the, for example, different foreign policy strategies of China, Korea, Japan, Russian factor is of course one of just 9 bridge strategies or one road, one belt, any strategies just with a view on Russian factor here, which is just keenly important for Ukrainian foreign policy as well. Green development strategies then can provide the political and of course economic cooperation, avoiding so just great pressure of Russian factor in this area. So obviously that the green development, green growth projects and cooperation here between Ukraine and Asian countries, it's a win-win technologies. I think that this is the message that was used by mainly most of the speakers nowadays. I think it's favorable for both sides here, and I hope that it will lead to more prosperity Ukraine and Asian countries as well. Thank you for your attention.
And once again, let me thank for Dr. Svetlana Andrushenko's enthusiasm and her strong intention to launch absolutely new direction in international relations. Thank you once again. And now let's come back to Asia. And my pleasure to invite for the speech Dr. Olena Mikol, our colleague from the National University of Kyiv Mohila Academy, and her topic is about foreign policy of Ukraine towards China and Japan, current state and future potential. Please.
Until the rest of this very informative conference. And so today I'm going to talk about real interests, because when the topic was proclaimed as interests of Ukraine in Asia, I thought that the topic will be Asia and interests of Ukraine. So, but before I talk about Ukrainian interests in Asia, specifically towards Japan and China, I would like to talk about two very important things that affect our interests and how we formulate them. Skipping some points that, like you can ask me why I came to this or that conclusion, we can put it aside a little bit because I understand that we are all tired and we are pressed for time, but I would appreciate if you ask me something, so feel free. So the first thing is that what we are waiting for are two challenges. The first one is the presidential elections 2019, and what it means. It means that we are not sure if the stable situation will be kept. And this is the major thing that foreigners are asking. If you are sure that Ukraine will continue this stable situation, keep it as it is now. We don't know. And second one is that Ukraine is a small country in terms of GDP. It's very small. And Ukraine becomes every year smaller and smaller in terms of resources that we have. And because we have very scarce resources, we have to be very smart and we have to play smartly how to use these scarce resources. For instance, we can use Pareto principle, where 20% of the efforts give 80% result. But it should be a very deep analysis made, and we should really think hard what we have to do with our scarce resources and how we are going to use them in order to improve and to increase these resources. And this is not the topic for this discussion, unfortunately or fortunately, but one of the ways how we do it is that we focus on Asia. And let's not even discuss if we should cooperate with Asia or not cooperate, or we should think we have to do it. We don't have time to think, oh, what we should do and in which ways. We just have to do something, and this something means cooperation, because lots of people and lots of countries are doing it, and they have benefits from it. Ukraine is lagging behind. We are still talking. And so specifically towards Japan and China, and what is also important for us is, because for us it's a goal for us, but at the same time this is the condition for our existence as a country. These are two things. The first one is make the country safe and restore its territorial integrity, and the second point is to make the country with good well-being, to make the country as a country of good and nice for living, for citizens, to avoid brain drain, whatever. And so I will stop by here on very brief thing. It's my evaluation of Ukraine interests towards Japan and towards China, what we have now, what is the current situation, and at the next slide, I will stop by what we may have. So the thing with us is that these are two countries, China and Japan, and we have totally different perception about them. I'm not saying now it's good or bad, but what we have now is that we have a total fascination with Japan. What Japan says, what Japan does, whatever, you know, this is even without even checking what really Japan does, we're already fascinated because this is Japan. This is soft power. With China, it's not that fun now because we don't know China. China is communist, and the general perception of people when we talk about China is that, like, China is not understandable. Something psychologically, very simple. What I don't understand, I have a fear for, I don't trust. So this is the basics where we start from, and then we go to the interests, and the interests are generated by the people who are in power. So we have, I would say now, very extremely limited interest. This is support of territorial integrity, and let's put it directly, support against Russia in terms of politics and security. Second one is economy and finance. We want to increase our export volume, which is okay, and we want to develop our infrastructure and energy sector, which are our priorities. And what we can suggest is our space technologies. That's kind of all that, I mean, if you can find something else, great. But these are the major points, and how we do it, we just say, okay, come and invest. And you know, when foreigners look that even own Ukrainian oligarchs are not going to invest a lot of money in Ukraine, so there are a lot of questions without answers. So, I mean, we are not country destination for investments. And why we are not country destination for investments, we all know why. So, it affects, of course, our general current state of affairs with two countries. We have frozen political dialogue with China, so the Chinese diplomats and the Chinese researchers are saying that the relations are stable. Thank you very much for this, but we know what it means. And with Japan, the situation in politics is a bit better because Abe came first time ever in 2015. He came with the official visit, but after it, nothing. After it, nothing. Why? Because we are not active in this area. We just ask for investments, and that's all. But if you know that, for instance, one of the conditions for Bortnichi station, this $1 billion that is given to by the Japanese JICA, one of the conditions is that the pursuit of political reforms. Are we doing reforms? Are we reforming? I don't know. So with Japan, Japan is strongly supporting us with G7, which is obvious, and Japan is also standing with us in terms of the sanctions against Russia. I skip now the point of the Chinese position in this issue. It's a different perspective, and it's not for this topic now. With Japan, we have JICA programs, UN programs. Japan is, as far as, of course, you know that Japan is a part of IMF, and because IMF is our major donor, and since we now postpone our decisions concerning IMF cooperation, we postpone the investments, we postpone everything. let's look at it, at this really. And also, of course, Japan also invests a lot in us as Kusanone program. Kusanone, it means grassroots program. And it invests in the evolution and in the making of our civil society. Japan makes it, not Ukraine. So, and then what we have in tourism and culture, we have visa regime, and that's all for the time being. This is what the Korean and the Indian ambassadors were saying, that we have lots of tourists, please do something and they will be your tourists. So let's discuss it, yeah? So in terms of visa regime, Japan simplified visa regime for Ukrainian citizens in some terms last year or this year, last year, but not for all, of course. And what are the potential interests that could we have? Potential interests are stemming from our strategy or lack of strategy, or I don't know how to say it better, but they should be future-oriented. Our policy should be future-oriented. Should not be oriented towards we are between European Union and we are between Russia and we have to do something with it. We have to project the future and we have to see what we should be in the future, because now I have a feeling that we don't look into the future and we don't think what will be in 10 or 15 years. We think from elections to elections. It affects our policy and it affects our international stance. As well as I would add easily and gladly here security and military cooperation and the initiation of security dialogue with Japan, and Japan is very strongly in favor of it. The problem is again Ukrainian side, because the Ukrainian side doesn't know what to cooperate about. Then we can defreeze political cooperation with China, and in terms of economy and finance, we should, and here already were the presentations that were saying about it, we shouldn't just produce beans, pulse, whatever. We should produce value-added product, and we should suggest it to the market, because we are losing a lot of money, we are losing a lot of resources just because we are super great in grain export. It's not fair towards Ukrainian citizens. We should do something with it. As well as we have to make a concrete vision and new projects in Ukraine, what we really want to modernize. Because I'm also involved in some business projects in Ukraine, and believe me, I mean, Japanese side, Ukrainian side, when they gather together, German side, for instance, the Germans are asking, what do you want to do, Ukrainian railways? We give you 55 million euros. For 3 years, Ukrainian railways couldn't understand what to do with these 55 million euros. They were just staying at the German bank, and the Ministry of Economy of Germany was not happy with it because the money was losing the value. And this is everywhere like that, because the foreigners are asking, what do you want to do with the country? Tell us and we will help you, but there is no strategy. Because there is no strategy, no general strategy, there is no vision, no projects. And besides, it was very nice that Mrs. Zhang, she mentioned this train that goes from Chindanda, yeah? Exactly, to Vienna. Through Kyiv, and it's very good example that, yeah, there is a Belt Road initiative still. When we look when we look at this official map of Belt and Road initiative, you see Ukraine. It's a really big country, but you see that there is nowhere presently the route via Ukraine. We're just talking about it. So we are losing these opportunities. Just look at this map. In the Middle East, even despite the Syrian war, there is a corridor. We don't have anything from this. Though we are here, it is strategic, but we are losing our opportunities to the others. And what we are losing, and this is also we are losing because we are somehow not a part of AIAB project, Asian Bank infrastructure that China made. And you see how very interesting we look. We are white, and all the participants of the bank, they are orange. Why we are white, what is behind it, maybe we have some special ideas about it. It's not known, unfortunately. And what we are losing, so import and import and export to and from China, you can see in 2017 it increased again, and this is 574 billion euros every year. So 574 billion euros. If we divide by 365 days, you can imagine how many billions cross the borders every day, and we are losing part of them. And just to make a comparison, our GDP of Ukraine is $104 billion US dollars. It was last year, so in euros it's even less. And so to be back, we also have to consider our participation in 16+1 initiative, as a colleague from Latvia said, also examine free trade agreements and focus on digitalization. By digitalization, I mean not digitalization only in information sphere. By digitalization, I mean Revolution 4.0, which means that we digitalize and we utilize digitalization in order to improve our industrial capacity. And also we have to check for investments together with kind of, alternative ways for investments along with international financial institutions. And culture and tourism, you can see for yourselves that we have a lot of potential. Just like here now, we should finally launch, and there is no Russia, there is nobody that can prevent us from doing it, at least to start dual programs, diplomas, Asian studies, whatever, at least to start moving the train. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, really, and I think it was a correct decision to keep you like almost the final speaker because of your strategic vision and because you covered many issues, problems, gaps, and mistakes made by Ukraine, frankly speaking, and I think now we clearly understand what for we provide this conference. Thank you once again. And now we will have our junior speaker, junior colleague, the student of the Institute of International Relations, Sofia Kovalenko, who prepared her presentation together with her scientific guide, Dr. Marina Khmara, and it will be about the development of Ukraine's Asia-oriented external economic relations. Please.
So good afternoon, everyone, dear colleagues and professors. Thank you very much. And today I would like to talk about our relations with Asian country, with one of the most rapidly growing economies of Asia, Indonesia. The clear notion about the distinct features of countries' economic relations enables to level out the negative effects of the global processes on the national economic system and guarantee and establish favorable conditions for its performance. Ukraine's geographical commodity trade structure varies under the influence of different factors, but exports to Europe and Central Asia averaged 2/3 during the period. So you can see it on this table, and I would like to emphasize that because of financial crisis and which took place in 2008 and 2009, and due to and because of our economic instability and all other problems, but nevertheless these processes gave impulse to reorientation and intensification of relations with Asian countries, and exports to Asia have been extremely relevant since 2014. Intensified political confrontation in the east of Ukraine resulted in transit routes of product distribution through some CIS countries, but the renewal and commodity diversification and expansion of Ukraine's export geography gave some impulse to export to Southeast Asia. And so Ukraine has a good opportunity for the development of trade and economic relations with the Republic of Indonesia, and Indonesia is the biggest archipelago in the world and a member of ASEAN. And Indonesia is an agrarian industrial state with favorable demographic situation and flexible banking system. It's one of the biggest rapidly growing economies, as I have mentioned before. But nevertheless, Indonesia also has some problems, such as insufficient legal system, informal economy, and deep gap between social unity of the population. And, but nevertheless, Indonesia is growing, and according to the World Bank Doing Business rating of 2017, Indonesia took 91st position against the 106th position the previous year. And as for current studies, Indonesia has even hired her position, and now it takes the 72nd place. So Ukrainian export is based on the agriculture and ferrous metallurgy products, but in 2014 and 2017, one could see a slowdown in export rates for the product group milk and dairy products, poultry, eggs, natural honey, on average by 42% annually. But the exports of ore, slag, and ash doubled compared to the previous year. So we can see a tendency that although almost everyone is calling us an agrarian country, and almost we export agricultural products, but there is a tendency for exporting ferrous metallurgy products and so on. Ukraine shows a high demand for Indonesian fats and oils of animal and vegetable origin, products of paper and light industry. Traditionally, and unfortunately maybe, the structure of both export and import, in the structure of both export and import, the services are less crucial. As for the cultural and humanitarian cooperation between our countries, it's mainly concentrated in the fields of education, science, and tourism. The draft agreement between the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine and the government of Indonesia on collaboration in the field of education is being worked out, which will form the basis for further relations. And the tourism, as it has been mentioned before today, has good prospects also, as the citizens of Indonesia are interested in visiting Ukraine for purpose of sightseeing, cultural and sport exchange, and you can see how drastically the number of people, the number of Indonesians who come in private business increasing annually, and from just 12% in 2013 to 100 in 2016. So actually we're developing our tourism sphere, and tourism are coming to us, even from Indonesia. And so to conclude, taking into account all current trends and the development and other problems, the development of mutually beneficial economic ties of Ukraine, the expansion of their forms is an objective necessity. The conquest of the Asian market requires strengthening in the government's efforts to create a positive image of the country, unification of forces on cultural and humanitarian issues, and support of Ukrainian businesses abroad. And now you can see the list of those spheres and projects where we can join our efforts maybe to earn some income. That are science and technology, energy industry, pharmacy, mechanical engineering, transport, mining equipment, aircraft engineering, defense industry, military equipment, armament production technologies, and agriculture, of course. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your interest, first of all, and for your detailed report. Thank you. And now we will come this short discussion, as we don't have that much time. But as we missed one very important region in Asia, namely Central Asia, I would like to propose our master student, Arsen Petrosyan, to just speak about this region briefly. Please come with your presentation, and we will continue the discussion then.
Hello, dear. Good afternoon, everyone, honored guests. Thank you for your report. It was very cognitive listening. I would like to say a few words on the general themes about the bilateral relations of Ukraine with countries of Central Asia. One of the long-forgotten old partners of Ukraine should be considered the states of Central Asia or post-Soviet Central Asia. It should be noted that despite the long experience of cooperation during the USSR, the potential of bilateral relations, especially in the energy sector, is not yet fully realized. However, today we can talk about the influence of geopolitical aspect on the prospect of convergence of Ukraine and the countries of Central Asia. In other words, we are talking about the recent similar position in a number of key issues in the post-Soviet space. Despite the assurances of Russian political elite about the prospect of Eurasian integration, the creation of the customs union, the CS of Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan are strongly perceived both by Ukraine and by a number of Central Asian states. So, based on the geopolitical situation, Ukraine can be a window for Central Asia countries in the European Union due to the presence of power ports and developed transport infrastructure. Through the territory of Ukraine, transportation of products and goods of Central Asia countries through very services, Porty Ilichivsky, Porty Odessa, in the European Union is possible. In addition, Ukraine can be considered as an alternative Russian road for the transportation of energy in the direction of European Union. In addition to the Ukrainian-Turkmen project, the Nabucco pipeline, there is a project on the White Stream gas pipeline on the Black Sea of Ukraine. Also, the existing Odessa-Brody pipeline, which can be used for the transportation of Turkmen oil through the territory of Ukraine to the European Union. In fact, from a geopolitical point of view, Ukraine is the only post-Soviet Soviet state except Russia, which can play the role of the bridge between the countries of Central Asia and European Union. And finally, in general, based on the realities, the modernization of bilateral relations between Ukraine and the countries of Central Asia, there are both positive prospects and negative barriers. The presence of general geopolitical interest and progressive economic cooperation are confronted with barriers in the face of the Russian Federation and Eurasian integration. The struggle of the Russian Federation, the PRC, and the United States for influence in the region. And in any case, at this stage, the countries of Central Asia remain one of the most acceptable areas of Ukrainian multilateral foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arsen. And now maybe, dear colleagues, if you will add something or propose your vision, maybe some proposals what to do with Asia here in Ukraine. So please, the floor is open. Yeah, please. And let me introduce our guest, Oleg Bilokolos, who presents the Maidan of Foreign Relations, right? The think tank for foreign affairs, sorry. A think tanks.
First of all, I would like to thank organizers for organizing such an excellent conference, and I'm very glad to see here a photo of Professor Pashuk. Yes. Am I right? Who assisted me actually a lot when I was a student of the Faculty of International Relations and International Law some time ago. And since I have some also diplomatic experience, I would like to suggest some practical things. I very much agree with previous speaker that Ukraine faces number of challenges. First, Russian aggression. Second, very limited resources. And third, how to manage all these challenges. What is important for us, more important for us, values or interests, human rights or commercial contracts? These things are also not easy to answer, to find the solutions. And what to do? As a professor, Chari said, probably we start with a realistic assessment of the situation. From my point of view, first, we have to strengthen our strategic partnership with countries who assist us in combating Russian offensive. But at the same time, we have to deepen our economic relations with those countries who could assist us in developing our economy, because without strong economy, we couldn't have, it's almost impossible to have strong military and strong foreign policy. In today's world, in post-Crimea era, strong country, only strong country could produce this strong foreign policy. So it's really room for improvement. It's really room for further elaboration and assessment of our way forward, and especially towards our let's say our near neighbors and Asian countries who show great success, and as ambassador of Japan suggested, it's up to us to use this advantage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And just to add maybe, again, Professor Kishore Mahbubani once said that to be successful in this world, you have to be very cunning. So that is maybe the lesson number one to learn from Asian countries, how to be cunning in this very sophisticated situation, let's say. So please, discussion is open. Maybe somebody else would like to suggest something. Mostly practical steps are needed. Yes, please. Or maybe questions, yes, sorry. Yes, please, Dr. Olena Mikov.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I cannot answer you this question because I'm not Mr. Poroshenko, you know, so it's him who knows the answer. My guess is that, and it's just my opinion, that, and it's not only Mr. Poroshenko, but this is the whole team, let's put it, you know, like, let's put it elite. I don't like this word, but like, it should be used, yeah? So the elite should understand that there are country priorities that should be visualized, specialized, put on paper, and that should be followed on. And without it, without this articulation, we will not go forward. It's just because we are not clear with what we are doing, and the rest of the world doesn't understand what we are doing. Okay, trade is good, but what is in trade? What is in defreezing relations with China? We don't know answers to these questions because we don't have this grand vision. It's in my opinion, again, I just say my opinion. So just we have to sit to understand that even despite that there will be next elections after next elections, there is the country, and the country needs secession plan, which with whoever party comes to power, there is a general line that should be put forward and that should be followed up, and then the questions can be answered. Otherwise, I'm sorry, because we don't have the mission, we don't have the vision, we don't have the strategy, and that's why we are guessing.
Yeah, and that's why the idea of this conference came actually, just to raise the question, because it's really very, very important. We missed a lot of opportunities, and to do something, at least you have to produce some ideas to show that the interest is here, among the young generation also.
Yes, we have the interest, but we don't have so far,
the support.
I don't know who should support who, in this situation, because the state should really understand that, there are priorities that should be put forward.
Yes, maybe more visions or proposals from the colleagues. Maybe the vision from abroad, what you suggest for us? Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, maybe I wasn't correct. China, people are afraid of China, not in terms that they perceive it as a threat. People don't know China.
Mm-hmm.
For them, it's not known country, and what is not known, usually people tend, it's psychology, they perceive to be afraid of. So the thing is that compared with Japan, China is not, it's perceived as communist country. Someone is, ahead of the head of China, and that's all. Because why I say it is because I ask my students, and first time it's like tabula rasa, and this is politology department. And so I understand that there is this gap even of understanding and of knowledge about China as a country.
Okay, maybe another vision, yes?
Probably I have some opposite point of view, because I think that the most visions about China is that this is the country of possibilities. And as I know, our students are also aware of this thing, that we have plenty of possibilities, and I think that our government is also aware of this thing, and we have just these 2 months, we have more than 2 dozens of cooperation consultations on different aspects, and people nowadays we have some more vision about even Chinese culture, possibilities in business-to-business cooperation is even more active than governmental cooperation between themselves. That's why I'm just not full of information and data on this thing. But as I know, as in geopolitical terms, I think that this is more true, that they're afraid of some Chinese.
Yeah, and China is the country of the rapid development. That's why it is the country of possibilities. And actually, I agree. Our students never ask about the totalitarian regime or communist party, something like that. They mostly eager to know about the economic development, the possibilities to provide some business projects, trade, cultural exchanges, educations, and so on. It's our students.
That's the difference with academy, because in academy they ask about political structure, who takes decisions, how they are made, what is democracy in China.
Yeah, maybe.
It's
maybe.
a bit different.
That is the difference, so we are lucky to have another students. Yeah.
I would like to add then 2 points. The first point is that if we look on future generation, we should look on millennials in general, in all over the world. And then we are facing the situation that actually even in the United States, millennials are not that keen in supporting democracy and democratic values. They are much more interested in economical issues or comfort issues or whatever. This is the one. And for this reason, our students also, I would say, that mainly they are interested about cooperation, well, even in political science, cooperation issues, education issues, to get support for education, and we do not really like facing these questions about regime. And another thing is that actually, let's have a closer look on overall EU policy, right? EU have stepped back with this democratic issues into political discourse when they talk with China, or it's the same with Central Asia, actually. So if you want to cooperate, then maybe you should step back with your democratic agenda at that moment. And this is what we also try to do in Latvia at the moment. So to find the ways. Actually, we have lost so many time also about with the discussing, do we have to go in China? And okay, our market is very small. We can't really go in like you guys can. But still, so we are trying to make this dialogue based on other issues, not on democracy for sure.
And then we will come back again. What is more important, values or interests, as is what proposed?
But we don't have to forget our values. Just they are maybe separate, and better is to have dialogue instead of staying somewhere ahead with my principles.
Yeah, waiting for something and asking for investments.
Yeah,
as was said before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, please. Thank you for sharing your attitude. So, somebody else? Okay, so maybe I would like to thank all of you, dear colleagues, for your coming, for sharing your interest, for your participation. At least even here in the Institute, we know about, yes, please, yeah.
The question, maybe somewhat personal, but from Ukrainian participants. Does anyone speak at some level any of the Asian languages in here? Thank you so much.
It means something, I believe. Yes, it's very important. And
yes,
that,
I think that demonstrates something. But
yeah, and at least again we can see that the interest is growing, and it is here. So thank you once again for coming, for the participation. We know each other better, I think, after this event. Even our colleagues at the Institute, we know that there is a very wide interest in different spheres, how to cooperate with Asian countries. And of course, the representatives of our government, Minister of Foreign Affairs, he left, but he promised to support us in our intention to provide this cooperation. Thank you.
Well, actually, 3 last words, if I may. Well, first of all, on behalf of the Institute of International Relations, it was a big pleasure really to host this conference today. We are very thankful to all our guests, both from abroad and from Ukraine. We really hope that this kind of platform, that this kind of conferences can be of support for ministries for foreign affairs, for justice, for economic cooperation and development, for them to realize where should they move, for not only talk about European integration, which is of course of great importance, but there is something apart from Europe, other regions, So we hope that such conferences may be of great importance. We really think that such research centers, which were suggested by our director and which are already established here, they can be of support for this whole activity. And in the end, I think that we will try to think how to publish your brilliant thesis, your brilliant presentations, maybe both in handbook and in electronic
and
PDF.
To
distribute, of course, in electronic, for instance, PDF format. Of course, I'm very thankful on behalf of the Institute administration to Ms. Olena Bordilovska, Doctor Professor, for this ideological idea and moving forward
Thank you so
this
much.
idea. And also to all our charming team, which
Yes,
was
and
all
our
the day
students,
today, and
for
our
all
students,
of them,
course.
yes.
So I think
We're
it's a
busy with this.
very nice example of teamwork.
Yeah, and thank you so much. It was really a teamwork, really. Thank
So
you.
the conference may be announced closed, I think, and we will be waiting for you in our institute in
Yes,
future. Thank
so
you.
see you next time. Thanks.